Well, grid and bear it, because Russian hackers are looking at our grid, that is our big old utility grid, and considering toying with it. They've got the technology right now to control it like remotely. I'm kind of overstating it, but I'm not overstating how big a risk this could be to us. The Risk Control Strategy CEO, Paul Vallis, is right now joining us. What do you think? How big a deal is this?
How you doing, Neil? I think it's a real big deal, but unfortunately, I don't think that we really understand the gravity of it and just how simple this is for them to penetrate, our outer wall.
Paul, and I mispronounced Vallis, I apologize. Do you get a sense that they're doing this to sort of just rattle us, and that they don't have this technology, or they do have this ability? Then, assuming they do, because I think they do, how would it work? What would they be able to do?
The best way to look at this, Neil, is this is criminal penetration testing. It's the same type of business model that actually Al-Qaeda used prior to 9/11. What they're really trying to do right now is examine where we're vulnerable, and that's why they're taking these shots over the bow. I mean, relatively simple, straightforward. They can see where we're vulnerable, and then they're going to go from there. The solution to this is relatively simple, but unfortunately, we haven't gathered that yet and put that together from the public sector to the private sector.
Well, how vulnerable do you think we are then?
Extremely vulnerable, because you're looking at a group of people that are brilliant, and they have all the time in the world to examine our vulnerabilities. If you look at it from, in-state or out-state actors, I mean, I know there's a good theory right now that the people that we're looking at are, in-state actors, meaning associated with a certain country. It's entirely possible because the business model behind in-state actors is focused more towards our infrastructure and taking us down as a country, where out-of-state actors or organized crime figures are focused more towards financial means or money, which is why they focus on the affluent.
Scary stuff. Paul, if you don't mind just staying there, I want to bring in my colleagues and friends. Fox Biz All-Stars, Hadley Heath. Manning, we've got Scott Martin here, Kayleigh McEnany. Kayleigh, you heard what Paul was saying. It is scary stuff, but we have seen utilities and key power stations hit, actually repeatedly. So it doesn't take much to bring our entire grid down. There's an inter-network play here that could just compromise the entire thing.
That's right, and we're talking refineries, banks, we're talking air traffic control systems, satellites, and Russia in particular is known for this. In fact, there were Russian criminals, quote, I think it was the Russian government, in 2007 in Estonia, 2008, I believe it was in Georgia, the same thing. There were cyber attacks, coincidentally, right as they were crossing the Caucasus. Russia is known for this, China as well. These cyber attacks are real threats.
When you think about our experience in this country has been particularly with the, I remember it happened in the middle of the day that knocked down a lot of power throughout much of the Northeast, and it connected with much of the Midwest. You could do a lot of damage and scare a lot of folks. If you think about it, Hadley, that gets to be a big deal, doesn't it?
You're right, Neil. It's scary. It's something that I think we're all aware of, but uncomfortable with the reality that someone else could have control over our power grid. We take for granted, I think, in our everyday lives how wonderful it is to have easily accessible, affordable energy everywhere around us, but the production of that energy and its delivery to us is something that we need for everyday life in a lot of different ways. So to imagine that someone else could attack us in this way is very dissettling.
Scott Martin, it's something like that, a huge disruption, to say nothing at trading on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and elsewhere. I mean, that gets kind of scary when our very power structure is compromised.
It does, Neil, and I think just like those trading issues that you brought up, they're hard to find the source of. And I think that's really the scary thing that's going on in today's world, Neil, versus, say, some of the other times past is, remember, we are blaming Russia here, and certainly China's in the crosshairs too, but these are kind of hackers without borders. I mean, there's a lot of ways that they route this technology to make it look like it's coming from somewhere where it's not. I mean, look at the China example, just a few weeks back, we talk about these China 5, right? These officials that we want to indict for stealing our trade secrets. Well, guess what? We haven't seen any heads roll on that. We've already tried to do that. We didn't have any luck. Now we're going to resume talks maybe in a couple weeks. There's nobody paying for this.
We haven't brought them over here, have we? Paul, how would this go down if it were, God forbid, to go down?
Well, there's a number of different attack vectors, and I agree with the point that was just made, because we really don't know where it's coming from. It could be China, it could be North Korea, it could be Iran, it could be a number of different players, and pointing it in a different direction. How it will go down is once they understand where we're most vulnerable, that's where they're going to attack. And
but
that's
when
why
you say when they attack, well, what do they do? Does one utility become compromised, or a feeder point become compromised, and that leads to another and another?
Right. Basically, Neil, what I mean by compromise is take complete ownership over that particular vector. So they can actually get in and control it remotely, turn it on, turn it off. And you're not just talking about power grids. You could be talking about traffic lights. You could be talking about computers that are inside vehicles. So there's no end to what they could actually do with this. We need to wake up and figure out this is very real. It's happening today. And if we don't do something about it preemptively, we're going to be standing here, we're going to be facing a lot of problems we're not prepared for.
That is scary stuff. All right, we'll watch closely in the meantime.